When I think of God's faithfulness, the first thing I think of is the story of Jonah. Not much is known about Jonah from his early days, but from what can be gathered in the Bible, Jonah was a prophet of God. In other words, this means that he was supposed to take the message of God and give it to the people. He was supposed to do whatever God told him to do. Simple as that.
I suppose God's faithfulness is best demonstrated under the circumstances of Daniel and the lion's den. At the time, Daniel worked for the king as one of 3 high officials. But honestly, Daniel was the best out of all of them. And on top of that, was greatly favored by the king. But not everyone was happy with that.
To me, God's faithfulness is best shown through his interactions with the Israelites while they were in the wilderness. The Israelites had just been freed from enslavement from the unbelieving Egyptians. Now they were on their way to a land called Canaan, a place where God had specifically promised to give to them. But to do that, they had to walk through a barren wilderness full of dangers and enemies. Sounds fun.
One day, God asked Jonah to do something he didn't really want to do. The thing is, there is this nation near where Jonah lived called Nineveh, and he did not like those people. He hated them, in fact, for good reason too. Let's just say they weren't the best. But God told Jonah to preach to them, to tell them about God and tell them to turn from their wicked ways. Like, literally, look it up. It's the first thing that happens in the book. And Jonah did not like that plan.
The other officials of the king asked each other what they were going to do about Daniel. They wanted to slander his name in some way, but they couldn't find anything wrong with him. When that plan backfired, they realized the only way to hurt Daniel was through his God. So they went to the king and told him that he should make a law in which everyone should only pray to him. And the king liked that plan, so he made a law. When Daniel heard about the new law, however, he didn't even hesitate to pray to God, the little gangster.
God asked the Israelites to trust him. But as they traveled onward, they were met with people who wanted to hurt them, limited water and food, and miles of barren wasteland. Most people would see this and say that they were just a lost cause. However, they had a secret weapon, and it was God. He fought back their enemies, provided them food and water, and guided them through the wilderness to the land he promised them. Nothing could stand in their way, except themselves.
When Jonah saw that he had to preach to his most hated enemies in hopes of them being saved, he took a different path. And that path was the complete opposite direction, like literally. Jonah sets sail to escape his calling, but God does not play those kind of games. He sends a hurricane to stop Jonah, and as he sees he can't escape, he has himself thrown out of the boat, in which he is immediately swallowed whole by a giant fish. God does not play games.
When the other officials saw Daniel praying, they went to the king and told him what Daniel was doing. But the king wasn't mad. He was actually upset because now he had to kill one of his best friends. The king desperately tried to save him, but the law could not be reversed. So as punishment, Daniel was thrown into a den of lions.
Soon enough, God saw that the people were never satisfied. "We are tired of this food. We want something different," they would complain. "More dangers. We were better off as slaves in Egypt. God just brought us out here for us to die. Some God he is." No matter how many times God saved, provided, and protected, the people still complained. And soon, God could take no more.
Jonah is now inside the giant fish and cannot go anywhere. So, with nowhere left to run, he starts praying. He apologizes to God for running away and tells him that he will do what he was supposed to do in the first place. And what does God do in return? He lets Jonah go. He forgives him. Even after he literally ran away, God forgives him and brings him to safety.
The king couldn't sleep that night. He could not stop thinking about Daniel. So, when morning came, the king ran to the lion's den and called for Daniel to see that maybe by some miracle he lived through the night. You can imagine the shock that came when he heard that Daniel called back. He had survived. God had shut the lions' mouths so that they could not hurt Daniel, and he lived. Even when Daniel was surrounded by enemies and everything seemed to be against him, God still kept him safe.
God couldn't take Israel's doubt and groundless complaints anymore. He finally said, "Enough." He made them walk through the wilderness for 40 years until every single person he had brought out of Egypt had died. However, he had promised to take the people of Israel to the land of Canaan, so he remained faithful to that promise. All of those who were the children of the last generation were led into the land of Canaan, and they were finally able to settle down. God still came through.
Because despite our failures,
Our circumstances,
and our disbelief,
he remains faithful.